Nutec's founder, John Leonard Hofstas. John was the initiator of Nutec, period. It was his idea. He was the one who gathered together a group of death with dignity oriented and technologically capable people of putting together, of developing this this equipment and procedures. The Nutec Group is a privately funded, self-delivering, technologically development think tank. It supports but does not engage in legislative reform. Nutec's funding father. Derek Humphry, who is the lead of everything that is this movement, quickly recognized that the development of technological ways to end one's life peacefully. Good luck, lady. Thank you. What's your portion? Okay. Nutec was designed to help eliminate these traditional methods of ending one's own life, all of which were ghastly, tragic, and horrible for all concerned. The concept of using plastic bags and drugs, not gases, but drugs, evolved in the early 1980s. The method was painless, but it often failed. In 1990, Dr. Jack Kevorkian's Thanatron was invented. The method of death was patient-initiated lethal injection. The patient was fitted with a feed tube which was clamped shut. The machine was turned on and did absolutely nothing until the patient themselves removed that clamp and the flow started. Death pursued within a couple of minutes. That proved to be cumbersome, so Dr. Kevorkian turned to what came to be known as the Mercitron. And this is the first inert gas end-of-life system developed. It consisted of patient-initiated carbon monoxide inhalation via a common face mask. The next development was due to one of Nutec's developers, Dr. Philip Nitschke, who created what came to be known as the deliverance machine. It essentially was a computerized version of Dr. Kevorkian's machine, but it produced a direct injection of lethal drugs after the patient answered three very blunt questions on the computer screen, and then yes. And at that point, the liquid started to flow, and the patient died rapidly. And Bob Dent, Judy, you in the audience? Okay. Judy Dent, Bob's wonderful wife, is here today. Nutec technically had its origins in 1967 when John Hofstas and Rob Niels met in Canada to discuss plans to design a natural death inducer they ended up calling the D-breather. Niels' team was developing a closed-system, water-based carbon dioxide scrubbing device. Built inside a 5-gallon plastic pail, his staff jokingly called his testing prototype the kick-the-bucket machine. This is simply a development stage. This was not for use by anybody. This was to test the internal technology of the system. They met, the third Nutec meeting took place also between John Hofstas, Rob Niels, and Philip Nitschke of Australia. It was Philip, who was the only first doctor in the world, in the Western world, to help 4 people die under the Rights of the Terminally Ill Act, which had been initiated by in the Northern Territory of Australia. Nutec set extremely high standards. It was designed to develop technologies that would provide quick, painless, certain, legal, demedicalized ways to empower rational adults to die at the time, place, and the circumstances of their own choosing. They operate under very rigid intellectual and medical guidelines. And any system that exists in this world today, if it is going to be considered to be one of the finest or the finest possible way to bring about self-deliverance, must match these and meet these criteria when new tech development. Oops, let me go back there. It must be non-violent, would not disfigure the corpse or leave behind a revolting scene for others to find or clean up after, such as blowing their brains out. The method could be used by terminally or incurably ill people who could not swallow pills or liquids. The required supplies could be obtained legally and without any prescription. That's another advantage of the helium system. Kmart is the last shopping place some of our colleagues have. The method would not require permission from any government authority or medical practitioner. Oops, sorry, I keep forgetting. The method would result in an intentionally self-inflicted death, which is not a crime, rather than assisted suicide or mercy killing, which are illegal in most countries. Newtek's simple goal to establish self-deliverance, rational suicide, as an unstoppable choice based solely on the right of personal autonomy. Newtek's first working meeting was held in June in 1999 in Berkeley, California, to discuss the new life-ending procedures. And as you can see here, that is the debriather being tested by the man who did the actual manufacturing. In 1999, when the debriather, and that's it right there, had been tested internally by Newtek, it was taken to the field to help suffering people die who had chosen to do so. The man holding the machine there is the Reverend George David Exo, one of the earliest of the exit guides, and a very close friend of mine for the last 25 years. Here's how the debreather works. Room air, what we're breathing now is 78% nitrogen, an inert gas, 12% oxygen, and 1% trace gases. When breathed, most of the oxygen is consumed and burned by the body as fuel. What remains is exhaled along with carbon dioxide, the byproduct of the food, of the burning process of the oxygen. But if only a fixed amount of air is breathed and then rebreathed, the oxygen content drops rapidly and the brain dies painlessly in about 5 to 6 minutes due to oxygen deprivation. It is completely painless and virtually 100% effective. Another one of the group members, Rob Niels, had developed and twice field tested another inert gas deathing device. His expirator was simple to the helium gas system, but instead of breathing helium from a plastic bag or face mask, the device substituted inert nitrogen gas to which the body has no reaction. Dr. Jack Kevorkian had already used this same technology prior to turning to lethal injection. The main problem with nitrogen is it's hard to get a hold of compared to helium, which you can walk in and buy off the shelf at any Kmart in any place in the world. This is 1999, only 2 years before the first concept of NewSec. Virtually the entire array of new technology was produced in 2 years flat. And at the first public conference in Seattle in 1999, 28 experts worldwide met to share their philosophies and discoveries. And 2 reporters, one from a Canadian, one from an American newspaper, and photographers were brought in for a special guided tour of the facilities. And this is what Newtek came up with in 2 years flat. The helium system is very simple. A hood and Kmart. 5 minutes. You gave me more before. Dr. Nishki invented the Cote, a carbon dioxide generator machine, another way to produce lethal gas. And his peanut project set out to independently produce Nibutol, but it was technically unsuccessful. In Germany, Roger Kusch took Dr. Kevorkian's trend and developed a lethal injection machine. I'm not up to date on what he has done or not done there. But the worldwide success of the helium system ultimately inhibited the development of new self-development technology. Helium was and remains that effective. New Tech still promotes development of new technologies of gentle death. As with today, their briefings are typically run in tandem with biennial congresses of the World Federation. And if you have any ideas, please contact us. And thank you very much to the World Federation and the Hemlocksec'd Network for inviting us all to experience beautiful Chicago. And according to my taskmaster, I probably have about 90 seconds to answer questions, so shoot. Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with someone who's on the non-invasive ventilation who can't be off the ventilator in order to breathe and heal?
There are problems that have to be dealt with individually, and that would be one of them.
Okay.
2 questions, and I'm out of here.
Just a comment. I don't think that the law is fully passed in Quebec. I think it's still, we have a provincial, it was a provincial decision by the legislature in Quebec, but it will now go before the Supreme Court of Canada, I believe, if I've got my facts straight.
Fantastic.
It's not fully into law.
Last question. Hugh?
Is there any use of carbon dioxide as a gas to exclude oxygen?
Carbon dioxide, there's no particular benefit of carbon dioxide over the other gases available.
The next speaker is Dr. Chabot from the Netherlands, a Dutch psychiatrist who's been working on technologies for quite a while. He has 2 books and 2 DVDs in the other room on the subject.
Yes.
And he'll tell us about that today, if we get it straight.
Yes.
Which is always question.
Thanks to Faye, who invited me here. She has been like a mother for me, and she has special motherly quality that not all mothers have, in fact few mothers have, and perhaps some of you have some experiences with it, but her quality is that she can keep the boys, the grown-up boys in the family, to fight each other out of the ring. And it's a great thing. Now, the main point is that I'm a researcher. And a researcher wants to know how things work, why things work, and whether they work, and particularly what happens when they fail. I mean, that is the point of being a researcher. And now anybody can call himself a researcher, isn't it? So you have to prove something, you have to provide some proof, and I will. This is a special moment, and I want to compare them to 2 other special moments in the past. First, the Supreme Court verdict, when I had helped a 50-year-old social worker without any illness, who had lost all that made her life worth living, and whom I provided with lethal pills, which at the time was in the Netherlands an outrage, as people should have an illness. And she hadn't, apart from what some call a psychiatric illness. So that was, the court verdicted that I was guilty without punishment. So that was a complicated case, and I will not go into it. Then the other special moment is that since the court the verdict of the Supreme Court has put me on the track of finding out how this peaceful, effective death could be accomplished without the help of someone like me, like a doctor. So a demedicalized approach has since 1996 been my focus. And that resulted in my Dutch PhD thesis on stopping eating and drinking, SED, and the medication methods in use in the Netherlands far more frequently than anyone had expected. Well, if you do research, you have to publish it. Otherwise, you are a self-acclaimed researcher. But I offered the results to a peer-reviewed international scientific journal, Social Science and Medicine, the interface of medicine and social science. And have a look at the title, because that gives in a nutshell the core of all my work. It's a self-directed dying, and then the core point is attended by proxies. Proxies, of course, can be relatives, they can be nurses, they can be friends, but I had set up my research so that I could not find suicides that had been alone. Only those who died attended by a or more proxy were involved in my research. Let's leave it at that. This is what I've been working on for years and now is available in English. I call this a quartet. 2 DVDs, left up and right down, top, and the 2 books. I'm not sure you can read the titles, so I have to read them aloud. The left top, in the quartet, I call this the first violin. You know, the first violin gives it the pace and is the central piece in the quartet. And the film is called Eyewitnesses, Personal Narratives about Self-Chosen and Humane Death. I'll show you in a moment a very brief part of it. But let me first go to the right. I skipped one important point. The films are made for lay people and can be understood without reading the books, just like the books can be understood without seeing the films. So what is the point then to call the Eyewitnesses film the first violin? Well, these films are made for lay people. Many doctors are lay people in this field as well. And it is made for lay people to identify with the persons in the film, to see how they dealt with either their own death or the death of a dear one. Once you have seen that film, which comprises an introduction, we'll see a few minutes from that, and then 4 other pieces, a widow relating the death of her husband with pentobarbital, a niece relating the death by helium of her old aunt, and a daughter relating the death of her father, her old Parkinson-stricken father, by stopping eating and drinking, and the last one, a doctor who had never provided assisted dying to an Alzheimer patient. He tells how in the first and hopefully the last time in his life he did that. Okay, so it's a film made for instruction and for lay people who can fully understand it without any instruction. Let me first show you this 2.5 minutes. Please, for most people in this room, nothing new is in it. I would ask you to judge this film on the merits that it is meant. I mean, the merit is that lay people who come and ask, well, my mother is in pain, or I want to find out what the ways are, this ill or old person should be able to understand. And the 2.5 minutes that you're going to see give an illustration how we go about. There were 4 eyewitnesses in the film, and this is the introductory part by an actress who, when she was in the film, when we were filming her, she was involved in getting the medicines because that was her chosen way. She was very involved with the subject, and I understand you can see this. I hope you can see this. Pascal? The film doesn't show up. Which it would be necessary, and I've put them together in the 6th slide. Help me please through the 6th slide. This one, yes, we're there. And from now on, no films, so it should work. I needed an acronym because I came up after having consulted Nietzsche's book very thoroughly. He gives us 5 criteria in his Peaceful Pill Handbook, and I have made from them 4 of them overlap with Nietzsche, but some are different. So the first and most important for me is safe for those present. If a self-chosen death should be attended by someone, by proxies, has the man left this? It's again. Safe for others present, of course effective, of course death would come while asleep, and availability is one of the criteria. Then something I put very much stress on, and others haven't, responsibility. One should perform the acts that cause death oneself. Without the lethal acts, there should be no injury, no brain damage in case of failure, and for Australia, with a very tough legal system, the last one is important. In the Netherlands, detection prevention is not that important. So in the book, the medication methods and the helium method that conform to these criteria are in the first part, and then in a chapter called The Search for the Holy Grail, I included those methods that pop up in the Right to Die literature that sometimes are not, there's a discussion about, but I feel they are not conforming to the Caesaric criteria. Next slide. In my book, I point to open issues in do-it-yourself methods. And I'll note 5. Here you see 4, the 5th one will come up shortly. If there are questions about it, but the important thing is that for each of these open issues, potassium chloride, could that be used in a suppositorium? Well, it could, but it wouldn't be effective. That's the point I got from my pharmacists and toxicologist advisors. Nicotine is very effective. You can easily extract nicotine from tobacco in a high concentration. But it has disadvantages, and the main disadvantage is that, as far as I know, it has never been used. So I wouldn't advise nicotine, but it conforms to the effectiveness criterion, and it would be safe for others present. Carbon monoxide definitely would not be safe for those present, and I've come across in the literature of no method that makes it safe, really safe for those present. Then the compression method. If you oppress the arteries high in the neck without obstructing the windpipe, then that should take away consciousness in a few minutes, and death should follow. So I deal with that method in detail. I have a point of view on all these points, but I give them to what I feel is lacking nowadays, the culture of debate among experts in the right to die. Once every 2 years, a conference like this, how stimulating and useful it may be, that is not enough for an ongoing culture of debate among experts, or insiders if you want to. For instance, there is more need for advice by toxicologists and pharmacists. Let me give you an example that pharmacists differ of opinion. The ones I consulted say the Drion pill, a pill that is lethal in itself, will never come about. It's impossible. And yesterday I heard the NVVA, Petra de Jong, saying, well, in 1 or 2 years, our experts say it will be there. So that's an interesting point for debate, I would say. So hopefully they are here, and they will get onto an exchange with my experts. Another point, I think there is far too little information exchange about the pharmaceutical providers. Nietzsche has done a great job here. You should be credited for that. And we're grateful in the Netherlands, the Horizon uses his information. But this is a field that can be developed so quickly, and we need to test it. So right to die groups should have a sort of central information point on this and exchange that with right to die groups in other countries. Well, I'm always collecting reports about failures and analysis. This has been most helpful. And I publish these failures and their analysis on my website in Dutch. Unfortunately, I'm not able to publish them in English yet. I hope so in the future, or someone else might help me to do that. But this is part of the culture of debate, that failure should be analyzed and published for lay people and insiders alike. So I feel there is a lot to win here. Last slide, there's new light shed on do-it-yourself method in A Way to Die. There's no time to discuss them all, but let me say that chloroquine really conforms to the standards that Dick, Cote, and Derek has set. Chloroquine is available in many countries without a prescription. Chloroquine is very cheap, and chloroquine is very effective in a humane way if used together with the right amount of 2 types of benzodiazepines, sleeping pills in ordinary language. So it's a demedicalized, cheap, available route that some call a risky method. Since my contacts in Germany with Dr. Christian Huber-Arnold was publicly been doing this, we have collected evidence on over 50 cases of the dose 17.5 grams of chloroquine sulfate with 500 milligrams diazepam and 100 milligrams of midazolam. And it's always been effective. Death followed within 2 hours. Apart from those reports from Germany, they conform to the reports I got from the foundation, the Horizon. We have not 50 there, but they have been always effective. So it's not a risky drug anymore now that we know how to combine it with the good amount of sleeping pills. Then there's new light shed on the plastic bag method in my book. You should realize that reports on a plastic bag test, of course there are reports how someone has been found dead with a bag around the neck And so it seems effective. Well, it seems. And sometimes it is effective. But what has never been published, well, only incidental reports about failures. But when I started to research this subject, I came about failure on failure. But these people who fail and who awake after 10, 20 hours, they are ashamed. They won't come a step forward and say, here I am, I failed the plastic bag method, because I'm a failure anyway. That's why I want to live, don't want to live anymore. So the problem is that our data are incomplete. It's very hard to get the failures above the table. Successes are more often reported with all the emotions. But then even if there is a success, the cause of success in my research sometimes is by assistance, which is kept secret. In my interviews I came across two such cases. People, one is a mother with a psychiatric daughter who after many, many years of failed treatment helped her daughter to die. The daughter used sleeping pills and the plastic bag. But when the mother came to look at her, she wasn't dead because she had been struggling and the bag had moved aside. So she was in deep sleep. And then the mother took the most difficult decision in her life. She placed the bag back on the neck and held it there till her daughter was dead. And the other example is for the husband. He did the same for his spouse. And I was the first. The police, they were investigated. The police had to report to the police, but they had kept it secret. And I was the first, many years after the day, in a confidential, in-depth interview, that I saw the emotion that there was something hidden, and I probed further, and then this came out. Then there is a famous case in the Netherlands that death is not caused by hypoxia in a case of plastic bag with sleeping pills, but with a non-benzodiazepine, a rarely prescribed sleeping pill. And there was a police investigation, it became a court case, and therefore there was a post-mortem, and the post-mortem revealed that death had been there only 1.5 hours or more after the plastic bag had been put in place, so it's not hypoxia. And the level of the sleeping pills was mentioned as the probable cause of death. So my conclusion is that there is an imbalance between reports of success and failure, and the data are incomplete. And in the few data that I feel are reliable, 1 in 3 cases of the plastic bag method was successful, and in 2 in 3 it failed. So now my understanding that I've said for a successful Cesarite criteria kind of method is that it is successful in 90% of more cases. So unless I have evidence for that, I won't publish it as an effective method. So here we are back, and I think the discussion should start, or the questions. Let me only draw attention to the last line in this slide. I think an important new point in my book is the stress on video recording of the last acts that caused the deaths. I know in the Farwell Foundation in Canada, this has been standard practice for some time, and we have exchanged how to, well, best to do it. And I've, in my second edition of the book A Way to Die, I have included, do take recordings of sessions in which the person explains to someone, a relative, why he wants or she wants to die. So you have recordings at a in the preparatory phase, and you have recording in the final phase that someone, performs the last acts. In helium, the two last acts are turning the tap on the tank and putting the bag full of helium over the face. If someone does that himself, and in medication, of course, eating the medication. That's it. Questions, please. Faye tells me 3 minutes, so urgent. Yeah.
You had us a slide of the video and the book and another video.
Oh, yeah.
What were the other three? You only told us about the first five.
Well, you want to see that slide again, so, but somehow. Eyewitnesses film, helium acid film, stopping eating, drinking, and a way to die. That's 4. Other questions?
Let's go back to nicotine that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned nicotine, but with although no example. With vapor cigarettes becoming popular, aqueous solutions of nicotine are becoming readily available. Is that an area that is worthy of research?
It is worthy of research. It definitely is. What I've been told by my expert advisors is that if you drink nicotine, it is so filthy, the taste, that you will start vomiting. Now, of course, we counter vomiting by antiemetics, and you could take fast-acting and long-acting benzodiazepines just before you drank it, so you fall into, within a few minutes, into a deep sleep, and you will suffer the stomach cramps briefly. But what my experts fear, but no one has tested it, is that even if you've taken antiemetics and you're in deep sleep, such an amount of nicotine may still cause the stomach to vomit. And of course then, it fails. It is worthy serious attention because it's highly lethal.
Would you comment on tricyclics? Tricyclics, please.
Yes. I wish I had it. Yeah, tricyclics. For the others, no. Well, you remember I put chloroquine on top, and then I discussed the plastic bag, and the others immediately below were the tricyclic antidepressants, which are cheap, easily available. And the reason I put them on third is that we have less reports than with chloroquine. With chloroquine, I'm so certain because I have reports from several sources, which I really probed into. But with tricyclics, what we know is that the toxicologists say it is highly lethal if you use 7.5 grams together with, of course, sleeping pills. It is very lethal. But people who died that way have not been analyzed. I have no detailed reports. And if I have no detailed reports, because of the authority of the toxicological literature, I must mention them, because they think it's equally effective as chloroquine. But, I wish there were more reports. But nowadays, they are not likely to come forward, because in the Netherlands, the Horizon works with pentobarbital. So nobody uses chloroquine anymore, or chloroquine anymore, or the tricyclics.
It's used here.
Yeah. And have you detailed reports?
No, I don't. It's used by Compassionate Choices sometimes.
Well, I meet people from Compassionate Choices in San Diego, so that will be my first question to them. Is it possible to exchange? And I have experienced that in the past, these organizations are extremely reluctant to give. If we don't exchange, if we don't trust each other enough to exchange detailed reports.
Well, one more question. Talk about refusal of food, hydration. method?
Well, it's the oldest method, and let me confess that it is my preferred method. If I'm going to die, and I have a choice, I will go for stopping eating and drinking. Why? Because with the proper palliative care that is detailed in the book, it is such a peaceful method that gives your relatives, my wife and my children will be with me, the chance to comfort me for about 10 days. And then I will pass away. And my GP, when I talked with him about my preference for stopping eating and drinking, he said, if you become delirious, which sometimes helps, I'll give you a low dose of haloperidol, which is an antipsychotic, which either cuts short, or if that doesn't work, I will terminally sedate you. So you need, if it doesn't work in the last days, because becoming delirious is very normal in dying people. It's so often. And if you're dehydrated, the chance is even higher. So in that situation, you need that a doctor can, because you're delirious, you're dehydrated, you have your advance directive and your proxy who says, no, he doesn't want infusion with water. He has refused that, and it's illegal to give it to him. Then there is what we call a refractory symptom, and that is an indication, a medical indication in the Netherlands for deep sedation. Yes. Yes, Peggy, please.
You live in a country...
No, we can't understand.
We live in a country, this is true of many countries, in which there are literally tens of thousands of overdose deaths a year. Unintended, unwanted, but lethal. What do we know from the research on overdose deaths, especially heroin, about the pharmacological properties of producing death? I realize that these drugs are not legal. They are, however, shall we say, widely available. This is Chicago. Go out on any street corner. The question is, what do we learn from the overdose deaths untended in this or any country that might be useful in this other inquiry?
In the Netherlands, I couldn't get overdose statistics. I could get death statistics from the central organization of the government, but they don't give the details which drugs are used in which combination, which is essential, and you also have to know what illness has the person, because
These are young drug, typically abusers who end up overdosing.
okay, but abusers who end up overdosing, that's a mess to go into as a researcher for, I mean,
That's something we might want to know about. That's the only question. Is there something we could learn there that would be useful both in preventing unwanted overdoses and perhaps in making possible wanted overdoses?
the question is, can we learn from drug abusers who die about unwanted uses of drugs? Well, someone else should answer the question, because I don't think we can learn much from that, because it's hard to get any details. Is there any researcher here who knows how to get details out of this?
Heroin overdose would be like an opiate overdose, wouldn't it?
Sorry?
Heroin overdose would be the same thing as an opiate overdose, a large dose of opiates.
I've left the topic of heroin. It is discussed in the book methadone, which is a medical drug now, and methadone is discussed because it might be available sometimes. Heroin is often, as long as it's not for medical use, heroin is cut, and it's only confusing to give information for me. And then, just one second.
Well, the problem is these drugs are illegal, right? So if we fail, we could go to jail. But the other...
But pentobarbital is illegal either.
There is an organization in Vancouver called Insight who has been fighting begging our Canadian government to stay open, but they will have data, I believe, on past suicides because they are now trying to provide methadone in order to get people off the street and to get them off drugs. And I'm sure they must have data of the numbers, the huge numbers of people who have died from overdose.
Okay. There is an organization in Vancouver that has got data. It's called Inside, and they might be willing to share it. Interesting. You see, I know the lethal dose of heroin, pure heroin. That's no problem. But street heroin, I won't go into.
Over there.
Over there. Ask Cote.
3 minutes.
My question is very simple. I'm always surprised not to hear you talk about the lowering of the body temperature. The lowering of the body temperature as a means of death. And it's a traditional ancestral means of going up on a hill, sitting down in a warm blanket so you don't going to sleep and never waking up.
You mean in a freezing environment? Yeah. Well, I've tried to find out about that, and when I came across a few places in which it failed, someone who was sitting with hardly any clothes in a freezing environment, but not Alaska freezing, just a cold winter night in the Netherlands. And the body produced so much heat that after 2 hours she went inside and she gave up. If you live in a real cold environment, you can try that.
We have time for one more question.
What about one of the opiates? What about one of the opiates such as oxycodone, which is so readily available?
Oxycodone is very effective if taken in the right dose, which is in my book, and the proper precautions. So that's very true. Other.
Okay, it's time for our break. Both will be around. His books are next door and DVD. To get together again for more information about new tech, or as our next speaker is saying, working outside the system. Thank you for your quiet. So, it is my great pleasure to introduce Ton. Always surprises me to hear philosophers get in the act. Ton is with the Horizon Foundation, which is also called in Dutch De Ender. Okay, Ton, you're on.
Tom Vink.
By the way, although the discussant is announced, the discussant won't be here, so it will be all questions and answers.
I'll arrange it.
Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, anybody is planning to leave the room, would you do that now? Because it's rather disturbing to leave the room during any presentation, okay? Well, thank you for coming. It's good to see that you're not dead yet. It's a pleasure to be here as a representative or delegate of probably the world's smallest but no less effective right to die society, the Horizon. I hope you will excuse me for not giving you the story of my life. I am a philosopher in the empirical and sceptical tradition of David Hume, the Scottish philosopher. And I work as an end-of-life counselor with the Horizon. I do this work in close collaboration with 6 colleagues and supported by the board of the Horizon. And maybe it may be of interest to know that's your last chance. I did my best. Maybe it's of interest to know that I have been prosecuted in 2005 for giving assistance with suicide, and I was acquitted in 2007. In 2013, December, I was interrogated again by the police on the same but different charges, and again in 2014, January. I'm just saying this so that you know the criminal mind that you are listening to. I do hope my English will be good enough for you to get the gist of what I want to say, but on the other hand, I trust my English will be better than your Dutch. For convenience sake, my talk will be presented with a few visual presentations, but that concerns only definitions, nothing moving, so to speak. These definitions I give on slides, otherwise it would be difficult for you to memorize them. As indicated, I will focus on working outside the system in the Netherlands. Now, first of all, you should know that in the Netherlands we have a system for everything, even a system for working outside the system. So I will present first some details of a theoretical nature, but of course dying is not a theoretical matter, so I will next present cases that I have been directly involved with, and that will illustrate the work of an end-of-life counselor. After that, I will try to bring both lines, theory and practice, together again. So two clarifications are needed to begin with. What is this system, and what is this system outside the system? Well, the system, the primary system, refers to what is known as the euthanasia law. I will have to say a few words about it, but I won't repeat what Peter de Jong has been saying on another occasion, of course. And second, the system outside the system does not exist in conflict with this first system. It's an addition to it. It's a supplement or complement. In the present company, my country will probably be best known because of its law on euthanasia. Curiously enough, this law isn't about euthanasia at all. In the total body of the text, the word euthanasia isn't mentioned even once. So you might want to know, what is this law about? Well, it states the requirements that have to be met by the physician, not by the patient, by the physician, who wants to respond positively to his patient, requesting the physician either to end the patient's life or to assist the patient in ending his life. And all this, and this is very important, all this is done under the final supervision and ultimate responsibility of the physician. In several thousands of cases a year, the physician does in fact respond positively. Almost always the physician ends the patient's life by administering lethal drugs. Only in a very small number of cases does the physician end the patient's life by assisting with the patient's suicide. The end-of-life clinic tries to change these figures. In all these cases, it is tacitly assumed that when this happens, the patient dies a good death, or a thanatos. This is assumed. It is not investigated, and since recently we know for certain that it's not always the case. On occasion, we now know that the patient dies a bad death. Nevertheless, even in those cases, the legal requirements of due care are met by the physician, at least according to the review committees. The review committees do not assess whether the patient died a good death. This slide gives you some information. So actually, we ought not to refer to the euthanasia law, but to the termination of life law. The word euthanasia doesn't appear in the law. However, the habit of speaking in terms of euthanasia law is ineradicable. This euthanasia is what I will refer to as physician's euthanasia. This is a form of euthanasia that represents the system. In the Netherlands, euthanasia was originally and officially defined in 1984 as the deliberate termination of the life of a person on his request by another person. And that should be on on slide 3. Needless to say, this definition is seriously at fault, covering far too much. In fact, covering every case of one person deliberately ending the life of another person at his request. However, this can be easily remedied, as I did by defining physician's euthanasia as the deliberate termination of the life of a person on his request by another person in accordance with the demands of the termination of life law. This is a formal definition of physician's euthanasia. But we have to go outside the system, of course. In the years after the Dutch euthanasia law became operative, it also became clear that there was ample space outside of this system. This space is covered by the notion of self-euthanasia. This notion was reintroduced in the debate by Baudouin and Chabot, and it has a somewhat longer history, but that predates the current debate. In my writings, I have defined this self-euthanasia as the deliberate termination of his or her own life by the person himself under his own control after clear and careful consideration and carried out with due care. It should be on number 4. Of course, looking at my definition, I am obliged to do what the Dutch euthanasia law does not do. And that is stipulate what I mean by a good death. I will do so next, and I will also indicate where the differences lie between a good death of a person by the hands of the physician and a good death of a person by his own hands. And then we go to another slide. And so, this is my definition of a good death, and you're invited to shoot at it after I'm finished. Not at me, but at the definition. A good death. In sum, a good death means a death decided to after clear and careful consideration. It's a death in which the individual's role is as large as possible. It's a death that is carried out with the utmost care, that is not executed in forced loneliness. It may be in loneliness, but it ought to be not in forced loneliness. If at all possible, in contact with loved ones, without adding pain or suffering, and considered, given the circumstances of course, as dignified and accepted by the individual in peace and quiet. Obviously, at least I would say, these conditions will not be met in every case to the same extent. So this makes this good death an ideal that you might strive for. This good death, or euthanatos, is what is looked for in both physician's euthanasia and self-euthanasia. In both cases, death is self-requested by the individual. It is not requested by the physician, not by the patient's family or anyone else, of course. However, and then I'm going to the next slide, I can return to this one later if you want. Only self-euthanasia is also self-performed and self-determined. Self-requested refers to the individual himself requesting an end to his life. Self-performed refers to the individual himself self-performed refers to the individual himself carrying out the act. And self-determined refers to the individual having the decisive voice. Self-euthanasia is distinguished from physician's euthanasia by these last two qualities, being also self-performed and self-determined. So now, by way of goodbye to the theoretical part of my contribution, I will define also self-determination, or autonomy, if you like. I have to go to the next slide. Correct? Yes, that's number 9. This self-determination is in this context, that is in the context of self-euthanasia, it's defined as the attaining and keeping of control and authority over the process of preparing, deciding, and bringing about the termination of one's own life with due care and concern. In order to exert this self-determination, the individual must be mentally competent to do so. And he or she must also be physically competent to do so, though in the current circumstances in the Netherlands, relatives or intimate friends may contribute within certain limits. Okay, well, there's a lot more to discuss as to theory, but I will now turn to some examples of self-euthanasia in which I have been involved as counselor. I will confine myself to the use of lethal medication. I leave out the voluntary refusal of food and drink, as this is attended to by the physician, nurses and family. I will also leave out the helium method, as this is taken to only rarely in the Netherlands. My first case will be the case of Anton, who was a marine biologist of international standing. We met when he was 86 and he died at 86. He approached me as counselor because his physical problems had reached a level he no longer wanted to tolerate. He had a good relationship with his physician, but he loathed the idea of not being his own man in this most vital decision. His physical problems centered around his backbone or spine for many years now. He had led an eventful, fruitful and rewarding life. A life he could easily consider as being completed. He had nothing much to add and he saw no problem whatsoever in saying his goodbye. He only wanted to do this with the utmost care. He had remained a bachelor all his life, but his work and travels had brought him some good friends worldwide. He kept in touch with them, but he informed them that recently that at some point in the near future this contact might fail, and if so, they ought not to worry, he said. He was grateful for their friendship over the years. But all things on earth must come to an end. Surely a biologist should be aware of that. It's very much an exception for me, but when he asked me if I were prepared to be present, to sit next to him in his last moment, I agreed after having given the request some thought. His lethal medication consisted of 1.2 grams of oxycodone. There was a question about that previously, taken together with 120 milligrams of flunitrazepam, which he obtained through a reliable Dutch source I could inform him about. He had carefully taken his antiemetic in the preceding 24 hours. He left several envelopes with information for his physician, the coroner, the notary, and other relevant persons. As he donated his remains to science, measures were taken in that respect as well. After ingesting his medication, sitting upright in bed, he next laid down. We talked a bit for just about a few minutes, but his speech was becoming slurry in about 7 minutes. He slipped into a deepening sleep, and as far as I could tell, I'm not a physician, but as far as I could tell, he died within 40 minutes. I then left as agreed. Measures had been taken for the physician to find him in time. The next case I will briefly refer to was Carol. Carol was well over 50 when she contacted me. Her history of psychiatric problems and treatment covered a period of over 30 years. She lived alone, no children, no partner, no real friends. Her parents had died, and she wasn't an easy person to make contact. And in fact, the necessity of visiting me caused her some serious sleepless nights. She first informed me extensively in writing about her condition and its history. And at the end she wrote, "Some people consider their lives being over and completed when they're 80. I am well over 50, but I do consider my life as being completed and over. And I would want to be able to end it on my own terms. Dignified, well prepared, without causing pain or trouble to anyone, not to myself and not to anyone else. And so she did, 6 months later, using 2 bottles of Neanderthal obtained from a well-known address in Mexico I informed her about. A few days before the event, she informed me of the date she had set for herself, and we said our goodbye. Next is the case of Thomas. Thomas was 83 when we met, and he was suffering from the onset of dementia, a problem that is threatening for a lot of us. It was an illness he had seen progressing in both his parents for years. And already a long time ago, he therefore decided that should he be diagnosed with the same disease, he would put an end to his life in time on his own conditions. This was his reason for contacting me. Other than Anton and Carol, Thomas had a wife who supported him, children who did the same. In fact, I was first contacted by one of his children. And he had a number of grandchildren who were also aware of the state their grandfather was in and the plans he had made for himself. In this respect, Thomas was well off. Actually more, his physician, who felt he could not answer the terms for physician's euthanasia, nevertheless continued to give his support to Thomas and his family. He, that is the physician, contacted me as counselor because he wanted to assure himself of the reliability of the process, including the medication Thomas was going to use. This medication was the same as Anton had been using, oxycodone plus flunitrazepam, obtained from the same source, though the road to contacting this source changes at random for reasons of safety. And there is more. This is probably the Netherlands at their best. The local pastor, obviously of a free-thinking kind, was also aware of what was going to happen, and he offered his spiritual support to the family. So the evening before Thomas was going to take his lethal dose of medication, the pastor held an intimate service at their home. Present were Thomas, his wife, their children and grandchildren to celebrate Thomas's life. Next morning, surrounded by his family, he said his final goodbye. At the beginning of this year, the family published a small booklet telling the story of the self-euthanasia of their beloved Thomas. They openly told their story, including the contributions by the physician, the pastor, and the counselor, who were all mentioned by their real names. The story of Thomas is very similar in respect to the story of another client of mine, Jan Ru. Baudouin tried to show something of his video, and the widow of Jan Ru appears in this video. That was his wife, Nell, who appears in the film Eyewitnesses. Jan Ru also ended his life by taking liquid pentobarbital, as did Carol. I could tell you other stories I wrote about, also about elderly couples. They were an issue in these meetings too. Elderly. These days, I already spoke about that, I was informed about, by the children of an elderly couple. They had peacefully died together in their own home, with their children present. That's important. She was 83, he was 84, and he had recently been forced to move to a nursing home, much to his annoyance and to her great pain. The family brought father home for the weekend, which turned out, as carefully planned, to be the couple's last weekend. And they ended their lives together using pentobarbital powder, 12.5 grams each, obtained from a well-known address in China, the short one. So, all in all, I suppose by now you get the picture of this so-called system outside the system, illustrated by the use of lethal medication. There is some information on my next slide about this medication. Now, in conclusion, I would like to try to bring together the bit of theory and practice I presented to you. As stated, the notion of self-euthanasia is a normative one. It isn't just self-thanasia, it is self-euthanasia. It says here another slide. Okay. We noticed this good death before as an ideal you might strive for, so we have to ask how far this ideal has been realized in the examples I gave to you. How about Anton, Carol, Thomas, Jan, and the couples I referred to? Did they die a good death? And what problems did they face and had to conquer? And what about their families and loved ones? Looking at my definition of a good death, I think I can say that given the possibilities and limitations of each case, that death was indeed a good death. Maybe Carol, who died as she lived in loneliness, had deserved some final company, but this was her choice, and it fitted the way she had lived. Anton also died the way he had lived, and there is no doubt that he was at peace with it. Thomas, and also Jan Ru, you might see on the DVD Boudewijn made. Thomas, I am tempted to say, represents the best practice of self-euthanasia. Maybe also as does the couple I referred to. But let me add at once that this does not mean that there is no grief, no sorrow, no pain in having to say goodbye to life and the ones you love. Especially in the case of Thomas, who had a rich life in material and immaterial respects, the decision wasn't an easy one. And as a matter of fact, I have been far more in touch with his widow's wife after his death. She couldn't have been a widow before, of course, than before his death. And the same goes for Jan Ru's widow, Nel. People need time to come to grips with events as large and impressive as this one. So, it's becoming dangerous now. How about the law and other dangers, such as possible failure? You learn from failures. There are, well, you prefer not to have them, but once they're there, you have to face them. In the aftermath of a case of self-euthanasia in the Netherlands, the attending physician and usually the coroner aren't the real problem. But there is the law, the police, the public prosecutor, forensic experts. How trigger-happy are they? This remains as yet one of the difficulties the family and loved ones have to face as they turn from relatives into surviving relatives. At this moment, the quote-unquote unproblematic standard procedure is an investigation that takes about 2 hours or more. It means control of your home is taken over by a force of 6 to 15 officials, mostly uniformed. For someone who has just suffered an important loss, being questioned as a would-be criminal is highly unpleasant. Not to mention when you're taken down to the station for further questioning and autopsy being announced. These obstacles are mentioned under number 14. It is a part of our job as counselors to prepare our clients for events like these, just as we have to inform them of other legal issues, for instance in connection with the obtaining of the lethal medication of their choice. However, even taking this aftermath into account, my story sounds like an uncomplicated, happy one. And that raises my last question. Do things ever seriously go wrong? The individual failing to die, awaking or threatening to awake after a long, deep sleep. There's a well-known case in which I was involved as counselor where it looked as though my client indeed would not die and re-awake. The situation lasted for some 48 hours. A film has been made of this case. It seems the Dutch are in the habit of making films of this nature. This film had a happy end, however, as Paul, suffering from dementia, did after all die. The film was aptly named Before I Forget. This all happened in 2008. And it's a nice detail that Paul's daughter, Caroline, joined us as one of the counselors. Another case that pops up in the press every now and then is the case of a male psychiatric patient who did indeed take his lethal medication as he should, but did not die. Hospital nor psychiatric clinic were prepared to consider physician's euthanasia, and the man tragically jumped in front of a train and died. This happened in 2009. Nowadays, in 2014, in both cases, better lethal medication would undoubtedly be used. Failures are very rare indeed. As far as we can establish, they result from being found too soon by the wrong people, or not correctly following the procedure for self-euthanasia. For instance, not taking your medication securely seated in bed, but downstairs, thinking that you can still go upstairs to your bedroom, and never reaching the stairs or falling off it and vomiting as a result. Or not taking an antiemetic at all. Or pausing for a moment when taking the medication and thus falling asleep before finishing it. And of course there is Murphy's Law. Recently, a client of mine very carefully followed the procedure. Nothing, really nothing, was left out. But she did leave something on. A lamp that was never on during the night and now alarmed her neighbors, who, etc., etc. Ultimately, it is definitely only the client's responsibility to take this most important decision. But notwithstanding these exceptional circumstances, that I think are really exceptions, I can safely say that self-euthanasia has reached a stage where it is available as a reliable possibility next to physician's euthanasia. I would like to add to that, I am a philosopher after all, that for moral reasons, self-euthanasia may even be the option to be preferred. The difference between ending another person's life or your own is, of course, significant. But I will have to let this issue rest for today. So thank you for your attention so far, and if there are any questions, I will surely try to answer them.
Question? Could you run the slides back where I can see the previous one, please?
Which one do you want to see?
The one with the name of the drugs that were used.
Oh, the name of the drug, the name of the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You just want to write it down. That's no question, you just want to see it. Okay. Okay, no problem.
I mean, you talk about self-euthanasia as though everybody knows how to do it, and very few of us do know what these reliable sources are and how reliable they are. I mean, talk about failures. We don't know whether the powder we receive is cocaine or talcum powder or Nembutal.
That's meant as a question. You want me to elaborate on that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I will. Well, we work with an address in China that I mentioned, I think, yesterday. We have an address in Mexico that's too long to memorize, so I couldn't give it to you now. You can find them in Nietzsche's Peaceful Pill Handbook. The important thing is that these addresses have been tested consistently. And in the Netherlands, they have never failed. All our clients have always received what they ordered. And in the exceptional cases that they didn't receive, it was because customs intercepted the shipment. This happens very rarely, but we have to inform our clients about the possibility that it may happen. And when I say it happens very rarely, I can say that I had 2 clients in a few hundred who did not receive the medication. They reordered it with a certain discount, and then they received it after all. Does that help?
Well, yesterday you gave us the email address of what you said was a reliable source in China, and some of us took it down, some of us didn't.
Well, I prefer to refer you to the Peaceful Pill Handbook, where you find all the information.
Well, you may not know what the Peaceful Pill Handbook is.
But where am I? I mean, if you don't know the Peaceful Pill Handbook, how is this possible?
It's
on the internet.
How many of you know the Peaceful Pill Handbook? And how many of you don't know what we're talking about?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. But if you go on the internet, you Google Peaceful Pill Handbook, or you Google www.peacefulpillhandbook.com, you got it.
Well, you have to pay money to get it. This is by subscription. About $85.
Maybe I shouldn't say this because Philip Nietzsche is certainly not going to like it, but there are a number of illegal downloads of this Peaceful Pill Handbook. You could get it for free as well. In my point of view, these problems are solved, actually.
Can you just give us the address?
I'm hesitating because I gave it yesterday and I got all kinds of comments. So I don't know the address in Mexico is too long to memorize. The address in China is by a certain Johnson, and then there's the number 0, and then there's msn.cn. It amazes me that you don't know, but it's very simple. The procedure is that whether it's a man or a woman, I really don't know. You send an email and you say, dear sir, I would like to order 25 grams of pentapamidol. That's it.
What does it cost?
At this moment, because I have no grip on that at all, at this moment 25 grams will cost you $500 American.
I think
if you want to die cheaper, you have to think of something else.
No, I mean, when we talk about self-euthanasia, whatever you call it here, self-deliverance, as Derek calls it, we usually refer to the helium method or, of course, the refusal of food and hydration. And that's really all we have access to, except illegal drugs, which we don't know about very well. So, excuse our ignorance.
No, but maybe I should add that importing pentobarbital in the Netherlands is illegal as well. You're not allowed even to possess it or to transport it.
So there's another risk factor.
Well, I don't know how the authorities react here. We inform our clients about the fact that they do import something that they ought not to import according to the law. At least what I explained to them is, well, you have these two values. The one value is obtaining the control over your life's ending. That's a high value for you. And the other value is being obedient and don't trespass the law. Now, it's your choice. If you say, I'm an obedient citizen and I don't want ever to trespass the law, well, that's your problem. We Dutch are a little bit, well, let's say, we don't make a great fuss of this.
It's very interesting to me that you and Bodwin are both Dutch. Petra de Jong is sitting here as head of the most progressive, most liberal, broadest organization in the world.
Except the Horizon.
Well, and so you would think once you're in the Netherlands, you have reached heaven, and why would you need an alternate organization? Petra, would you comment on, I should pass the mic down here.
Well, the Netherlands is not the Garden of Eden.
Well, that's what I'm finding out, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we agree that what we call self-euthanasia is possible, but the fact that it is illegal, that you have to obtain your medication illegally, makes it for the NVVE that we fight for a legal way to have the possibility to have a self-determination. And the legal way will be what we call the last will pill, and we are trying to get that possible through the government, and well, it will take some years, I think, before it will be there. But nowadays, I'm sure that it will be there in years.
I guess the issue is not so much what the method is who decides whether you are eligible or not. And I guess still NVVE doesn't dispense with those criteria, right?
Well, we think that's or you're not or yes eligible. It's just your own choice. No one is going to decide if you are eligible or not. So it's your own choice. If you want a last will pill and you want to end your life, that's your responsibility.
Now, okay, but can't get more liberal than that.
You might have, I would like to add to that, the chances that the Dutch government will supply this pill on this basis, that there is no test, no physician, no pharmacist between you and the pill, I think those chances are very small. It's worth trying. Don't misunderstand me. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
I mean, this is a very interesting question for the World Federation because we are a broad umbrella, and there are people not in this room because they're not interested in this. They want a law for terminally ill people to get medical assistance, and that's what they came here for. And then there's other people who are not interested in a law in which they have to their life and death has to be decided on by somebody else. And then there are those friends back there from the Final Exit Network that do have criteria that are much more expansive than the laws we have in the United States, that do enable people to help themselves die, but with supervision so that they don't have failed attempts. So there's all sorts of things in the middle, and it's very interesting to see the variety. Okay, questions? I'll shut up.
Next question. Okay.
I just wanted to clarify. Would all of those cases that you spoke about, would they all qualify under the euthanasia law anyway in Holland? Did you think that there was any place where you kind of crossed the line in terms of their qualifications for assisted dying?
Okay, you refer to...
Did you hear the question?
Yes, no, I'll try to repeat it. So you refer to the examples I have given, and you would like to know if they also qualify under the euthanasia law.
Right.
Okay, well, at least the second one I gave, that's Carol, the psychiatric patient, 50 years, her chances would be very, 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 very slim under the law. The last case I gave, that's Thomas, who had his family with him, etc. His physician said that he could not answer the terms of the law at that stage. He had the beginning of dementia, and his physician said that he couldn't answer the law. It's possible that another physician maybe would have done so. I'm not quite sure. And the first case is Anton, who was 86, and it's more a type of a completed life. And he simply decided, I don't want to burden my physician with this. It's my choice, it's my life, and I would like to be able to end. I had a wonderful conversation with him along this line. Okay?
Rodney?
A lot of the people, I do a lot of counselling, as you do, a lot of the people who have a completed life do not have necessarily very severe pain. And they have a problem in obtaining, for example, a strong analgesic drug like oxycodone from their general practitioner. Mm-hmm. The beauty of this process is that these drugs are pharmaceutical drugs which can be prescribed by a doctor. You don't have to go outside the country with all the difficulties of customs and cost and reliability of the drug. Have you got any advice as to how a person who wishes to end their life quite justifiably, as you indicate, can obtain strong analgesic drugs from their doctor when they...
No, I understand that. Maybe I haven't been totally clear on this point. This combination of oxycodone and flunitrazepam that was used by two clients I referred to have been obtained by a road outside the official road. So the person in question did not obtain them through his physician, but through a source that we are in contact with and that is able to obtain these medications. Bluntly spoken, it's illegal, so to speak.
Interesting, you should ask that, Dr. Syme, since you have prescribed medication for people.
But did I answer your question? Did I answer?
He's asking you your question.
Did I answer your question, or am I not clear?
Well,
these are medications that come from the official pharmaceutical industry, and someone is able to get hold of them. That's the best I can say.
There is a possibility for an alternative that if you have a very good friend who has got a painful condition.
Okay.
They may very well be able to obtain them genuinely and give you...
Well, these are very, very, very genuine. Don't worry about that.
No.
And you don't... What you say is possible. There are all kinds of things are possible. But if you have to ask your friend or your relative, you burden them, of course, with a procedure that might be difficult for them. Some friends say, yes, I don't care, I don't mind. Others say, that's asking too much for you. That's an individual decision, of course. Okay? There's another question.
I have a two-part question. First of all, where do the veterinarians, the large animal veterinarians, get their supply of phenobarbital or whatever drugs they're using to put animals down?
Well, that's a question I can't answer. I'm not a veterinarian, so I don't know.
Are veterinarians in your country using powerful drugs to put animals, large animals down?
Yes.
So they're getting it from a reliable source.
Yes.
And are those sources known? Are they in the reliable pill handbook?
No, because those sources within the Netherlands will never supply them, because they would certainly get into conflict with the law. Every time they use an barbiturate, they have to write down exactly how much they use. That's okay. Their obligation to do.
The second part is, I've been listening to a number of programs here, and there seems to be a wide chasm between the people like yourself who are committed to the use of the chemicals, and the people who are committed to the use of helium. I noticed that helium wasn't mentioned, and I was just wondering what your views were and why it wasn't.
Yes, well, that's interesting. I mean, helium works, and we have clients that use the helium method, but the number of clients that do so is very small. Probably those reasons are of an historic nature. Gas and dying on gas is not very popular in Europe, because we have a history about this. And there are a lot of people who don't like the idea of sitting next to their loved ones with a plastic bag over their head. It's their own choice. I mean, they could choose it. It's relatively easy to obtain. So if that's the choice they want to make, then it's their choice. And obviously, for those people for whom it is very, very difficult to obtain legal medication, there is always the possibility to fall back on helium.
In your speeches, though, why not add it under number 11? Add another line there and help the people who are looking for an alternative who can't get the medication.
Okay, well then it's all explicitly mentioned in Bauduin's book. I had to limit myself to one procedure, and the one that I have the most experience with. But it's okay.
Question back here, Tom.
Okay.
Hi, I have a couple quick questions to say from my experience with Final Exit as a senior guide. Number one, it was a sad day for me when the United States took Darvon, plain 65 milligram Darvon, off the market. I had a stockpile Darvon for years because that initially was going to be my drug of choice. I would also add that I have had 3 cases as a senior guide. All 3 had medications. One man, large stockpile of Seconal, and had a source that was in my area in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I kept my eye on that man because he was in my Compassionate Choices group, and I figured I'd know where to get Seconal. Turns out he was the very first case I had as a guide. He chose helium, and he left me with a gigantic bottle of Seconal, which to this day is in the back of my closet. I have no interest in drugs. 2 other cases, a woman from Switzerland wife with powdered Nembutal, sent her the powdered Nembutal. She didn't want it. She didn't trust it. She didn't want to drink it. She used helium. And the doctor in New York still had a license, wrote a prescription for his wife, and that prescription was filled from the as they told me, the AARP online pharmacy, a 3-month supply, quite adequate. He never used it and used helium. So again, there's all of this out here. It's personal.
What's your question?
This is not a chasm. I mean, this is just a discussion of choice as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
That was French.
Question. There's a question here. There's a question here in front.
This isn't actually a question, but an
No, it's not a question, it's an observation, but you recommended, if I understood you, to ask friends for their pain medications. It is, at least in the U.S., I believe, a felony for a person to give, sell, or otherwise transfer their medications prescribed for them to any other party. Well, not that people wouldn't be willing to do it.
Okay, if that bothers you, you shouldn't do it. But.
No. It's about protecting the other parties. One of the criteria that was discussed earlier was not presenting harm to other people. It's just something to be aware of.
Okay, no. It's all these decisions are individuals' decisions. That's very important to remember.
Another concern I have, Tom, is are we concerned about suicide prevention? And is this suicide? And where do you draw the line? And who makes these judgments about justifiable or not? If I may pause the microphone for a second.
No. That's why I introduced, at least I followed Baldwin, but I expanded the definition of self-euthanasia. It's not self-euthanasia, it's self-euthanasia. It has a moral component. It's a good death. And part of this good death is, of course, that you have discussed this with your loved ones, that you have thought about it, that you have looked at other options. That might be another solution to the problem that forces you maybe to end your life. Obviously, if there is another solution, less drastic, I would suggest take it. But if it is your choice to definitely end your life, I can't bind you and say you're not allowed on my account to do it.
We're pretty sure it'd be highly scandalous if Robin Williams died with a plastic bag on his head and a helium tank in his room. But the way he died, nobody really commented on it, but it was a pretty horrible way to go. So we're not really well educated in our country.
There's a question in the back thing. Well, okay.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I think I've heard that people who are in hospice.
Okay, I'm sure that for many, many years, doctors who had a good relationship with their patients were willing to give them drugs in doses over time that they could stockpile and use. My question is there a doctor in the room who's willing to tell us how many months in advance or years in advance they would need to start in order to accumulate enough of that stockpile?
My information, no, but even if you get a prescription for a second or an Nembutal from a doctor, you can't get it filled.
No, well,
does anybody else have Dick? Oxycodone, there we go. Dick McDonald?
As to medication, it is readily available as far as Seconal, but Nembutal by capsule is not available anymore. And we've had experience, as was mentioned before, of someone requesting sleeping medication. And we have them informed so they know to ask for it in a way that their physician may supply it. And that is that the usual meds today are just tranquilizers, not hypnotic, true sedatives. And so they must say that they have tried all the various new medications, and they don't help the way Seconal used to help 30 years ago, and they're going on a trip, and they always have problems sleeping, so could they have a prescription? Now, as far as having to accumulate it, some physicians will prescribe, I'll tell you most right now, especially younger physicians, have never prescribed it. So you might be better to go to a gray-haired physician for that. But some will prescribe 15 or 20, a few 30. And if you are getting your medication from online pharmacy, tell the doctor that if they prescribe them for a month, but that you really have a 3-month supply available to you from your online pharmacy, because they wish to sell you 3 months at a time. And we have actually had, in the past year, someone obtain 90 capsules of Seconal from either a knowing physician or an unknowing physician. So it is available. Pharmacists might tell the patient, oh no, they don't have that available, because many pharmacists don't know that it is still available. And you just have to inform them that, well, your doctor told you that it is available through the pharmaceutical supply houses. And there was a question about the veterinary medication and where that comes from. Well, veterinary doctors get it through a pharmaceutical veterinary wholesale or warehouse. And we have had people get it through either the supplying house or through veterinary practitioners in various locations, but certainly Mexico, it is still available, as some people in this room have proven quite recently.
Maybe I would like to add to this that of course it depends on which medication you want to use as lethal medication. If you want to use chloroquine, you will have to check the quantity that you need. If you use Seconal, you have to check the quantity that you need. If you use Nembutal, you have to check the quantity that you need. If you use sleeping aids, then you have to check the quantity that you need. I mean, it's your own responsibility to take care that when you do this on a reliable way, of course. Okay.
I have a question about morphine. I thought I had heard people say that they were in hospice and they were given morphine, and then the hospice aide said, but if I give you more, it would be lethal. And that was fine, because that was their choice. Can you comment on the use of morphine?
Yes, well, the easy way would be to refer you to Boudewijn's book, but morphine is also possible, and you need a quantity of over 1 gram, if I'm correct, of morphine, but you need to make a combination with sleeping aid, a long-working sleeping aid. It's kind of what used to be the dextropropoxyphene, the Darvon, that was mentioned, and instead of Darvon you might use morphine. Yes.
Depends on your tolerance, though. How much?
Surely. Yeah. All these things, it always depends on your tolerance. That's the great advantage of pentobarbital, of course, that it is so strong that it gets over all the other medication. That's very important.
I'm volunteering a word here from Neil Nickel, who used to be Dr. Kevorkian's right-hand person.
Something that some people may not realize is that most times when they restrict you to 1 month supply of a drug, it's not because you can't have 3 months supply of the drug, it's because your insurance company wants you to buy 1 month supplies. That way they get their copay every month. If you tell the pharmacist that you're going naked and you don't have a pharmaceutical insurance program, they'll be more than happy to sell you a 3-month supply. For your information.
Thank you.
Questions over here? Yeah. Can you briefly describe what you do as a counselor, and are there any costs to the people you counsel?
Okay.
Everybody hear that? What he described, what he does as a counselor?
Well, the last part of your question is the easy part. I charge 90 euros. That would be $110. I'm not quite sure, for a consultation that takes 1.5 hours. In those 1.5 hours, people can get all the information they need, probably, unless it's a complicated situation, let's say a psychiatric patient, which requires more conversations in order to make sure that the family is informed and that maybe loved ones are prepared to join in and to have their say in this. So it's very difficult to make a general statement about the content of this consultation. That depends on the individual that I meet with. Let's say the case of Thomas, who had his diagnosis of beginning dementia, was not very complicated for me. It was complicated for him, and it was complicated for his family. On the other hand, someone like Carol, who was a psychiatric patient, is more complicated for me. But please be sure I am not the one to judge if I'm giving the information or not. I just want to make sure that I'm kind of a mirror for the person who's talking to me. Are you quite sure that this is what you want? And that's one of the things why I'm so pleased with an antiemetic. You use it 24 hours before you end your life. That means that 24 hours you are confronted with the fact that you are going to end your life. And in those 24 hours you can always stop the procedure. I hope this answers your question, because I can't go in. It's an individual consultation.
Somebody had a question?
I would be interested to hear more about your organization and your profession as end-of-life counselor, and if you've had any suggestions for how to find somebody in that profession locally. Is there a referral system? Who is your organization, and how many other people are there?
The organization is it's the Horizon. In Dutch it's the Einde. That's as yet only in Dutch. I'm pressed to publish in English, and I will do so, but that will take some time. I have, maybe that's interesting for you, very incidentally, I have a client from the United States. I have been, I'm not a very technical person, but incidentally I use my wife's laptop, and then I have, what do you call it, a conversation on Skype. That's not very private in my point of view, so I always say when it comes tricky, then we have to do this either by telephone or by normal mail.
Mm-hmm.
People contact us from all kinds of countries in Europe. So.
Dr. Ed?
Talking about saving things and collecting things, they're all going to North Carolina shortly as requested. So if you wanted one bag, if you give me your card, I'll mail one and steal it from North Carolina. Sorry about that.
Well,
are these Charlotte's bags, or whose bags are these?
This is an interesting suggestion. I have to deny your offer, but that's interesting, because in the Netherlands it is certainly impossible for me to accept one of your bags and to present it to one of my clients. That would bring me possibly in severe problem.
You know, we had sources of very nice plastic bags at one time.
We have.
They're all still stuck, so. Any other comments, questions for Tom?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I think I've heard a couple of different points of view from you regarding the cooperation of the family. Relative to whether or not it's part of a good death. Mm-hmm. And what do you advise, or how do you get involved if the family is uncooperative?
It's difficult to give a general answer, of course. I mean, I prefer either the family or another trusted person to be involved and to listen in on the conversation. But obviously it is possible, like actually the case of Anton was really living alone, and there are a lot of people who say, this is my life, it's my decision, and I don't want to burden anybody else with it. I always ask after their family, are there any brothers, sisters still living? Are your parents dead, or are they still alive? Because after you're gone, they have to continue living with the fact that you have ended your life. And I think it's a kind of a moral responsibility to take that into account. But I cannot force anyone to do anything in that respect. But it is certainly part of my consultation, always.
I see John Abrams.
Well, I have an answer to that question.
Okay. Sorry, I don't get around to that.
I have an answer to your question. It's I do training on this kind of thing, and this may not sound very compassionate, but in this country, doctors are scared to death of litigation. And if you have a family member who you know disagrees with your wishes, I wish I had something better to tell you, but my unequivocal advice is, if you know they disagree, you don't even tell them. You know, you invite them to the funeral, that's it. I mean, you don't even tell them you're going in the hospital. It can be extremely problematic. Sorry, that's the only solution I've found in the last several years.
My question is, do you ever decide that someone's not appropriate for your services? Even though they have decided that they genuinely want to die, do you ever decide, I can't work with that person?
Okay. Well, basically it's not something that I decide, but it's something that comes up during the consultation. I mean, if I have a client, and I have one in mind now, whose dementia has progressed so far that he is not really capable to understand what I am actually saying, and not really capable to make all the steps that he should make, then I cannot help him. I've also had a psychiatric patient who came to me together with her parents, but during the consultation she slipped into a psychosis. Well, that's the end of the story, of course. So it's not something that before the consultation they have to pass a kind of exam, but during the consultation it's always possible that I find out that then they will not be capable to do the things that they have to do. So they have to be mentally competent, but in general also physically competent to do the things that they have to do.
I'm going to end this presentation now.